A lot of questions out of the Florida Building Code book. What I want everybody to make sure they have in front of them is the Florida Building Code. You have 3 building code books. You have the 2007 Florida Building Code Building. You have the 2007 Florida Building Code Residential. And you have the 2007 Florida Building Code Existing. All right? The residential and the existing are going to go pretty quick. The Florida Building Code Building is the one that's going to take a while. Once we get through this one, we'll go through the other 2 pretty quick. The reason this one takes so long is because the other 2, many of the things in the residential book are just repeats of what's in this book. The only thing I'm going to talk about in residential is basically those things that are different than the Florida Building Code Building. If you get a question about Florida Building Code, I would suggest always using this book unless specifically they said residential. Then it can still be in this book. Otherwise, it might be in the residential as well, or existing. But by the time we're done with these code books, you'll understand the differences between what's in the building code book and what's in the residential and existing. But to start off with, we're going to talk about Chapter 1, which is administration. We're going to do some highlighting in administration with regard to the building code. What I want you to realize, what's in the administrative chapter is those things that do have to do with administrating the Florida Building Code. All right? What buildings have to conform to building code and what buildings don't. What needs a permit and what doesn't. What is on a different inspection? What are on the different inspections? You know, what are they going to be looking for? What are the responsibilities of the building official and that sort of thing. When you get those types of questions in your life, you're going to think, I think I might go to the administrative section of the Florida Building Code. Another thing that I want you to realize is that this is the only code book that has the administrative section in it. Chapter 1, administration, is not in the residential and it's not in the existing. So if you get a question that's administrative type question with regard to code, once again, you're going to go to Florida Building Code Building. Another suggestion that somebody made, which I think is a good idea, is to take the table of contents out of the back, not the table of contents, take the index out of the back, because you will be using the index more than likely, and you can put it in the front. Or you can staple it together and put it in the front flap. All right, that's a good way. So what's going to happen is this book is kind of clunky. It's hard to get that back to the index. You'll eat a lot of time going back to this index. So pull it out and put it in the front, or pull it out and put it in the flap, staple it together, and have it there for you. It'll work out a lot better. Let's start highlighting on page 1.1. I want you to highlight the last couple of sentences. There's 4 lines, the last 4 lines on page 1.1. The sentence reads, additionally, a local code enforcement agency may not administer or enforce the Florida Building Code building to prevent the siting of any publicly owned facility, including but not limited to correctional facilities, juvenile facilities, or so forth. The next section, we're at the top of page 1.2 right now. This is section 102.2. We're talking about building, it says. I want you to drop down once again to the last sentence in that paragraph. The following buildings, structures, and facilities are exempt from the Florida Building Code. So these are the exemptions. You might want to underline exempt. You might want to hit it in a different color highlighter. You want to understand, you want to be able to pick up on the fact that we're talking about exempt buildings from Florida Building Code in this chapter right here. All these A through H. I've got highlighted buildings and structures specifically regulated and preempted by the federal government. All right, they want to come in and build a federal prison. Guess what? They don't have to come in and get and build it according to Florida Building Code. They can build it the way they want to build it. C, non-residential farm buildings on a farm does not have to, is exempt from Florida Building Code. Understand the difference. There's a difference between being exempt from building code and being exempt from a permit as well. Those are 2 different issues. So make sure that you look at the correct section if somebody should ask you that question.
I go through that all the time in the CEP board. People say I'm exempt I'm exempt from, like, to use for example the farm building. But you're right, they still have to go down there and get a permit. They're not exempt.
Right.
They're not exempt from local.
Somebody wants,
municipalities permitting,
you're right, you want to build a farm building or something like that. It might be exempt from code. It might have to not meet code because people won't live in it, but the county's still going to want a permit, right? Right. G, also remember that local codes and local jurisdictions can always be more stringent than state code. That's why you got to be real careful about applying what you do in the real world to what's going to be on this test, because a lot of times what the answer on the test is going to be different than what you do in the real world. Paragraph G, a temporary set or assembly or structure used in commercial motion picture or television productions are not excuse me, are exempt from Florida Building Code. And then you have a chickie, which is constructed by the Miccosukee tribe or the Seminole tribe of Florida. Those are exempt from Florida Building Code. On the bottom of page 1.3 on the left, you have section 104, which is duties and powers of the building official. All right. I don't have anything in particular highlighted under that section, but if you get a question about a duty or a power of the building official, make sure that you can find section 104 right there. Once again, on the bottom right on page 1.3 is permits. This is section 105. We're talking about permits here. As we go to page 1.4, on the left-hand column, about halfway down, there's section 105.2, work exempt from permit. All right. I want you to know that under mechanical, the following are exempt from permit. You have a number 3, a portable cooling unit. I have number 4 highlighted. Steam, hot, or chilled water piping within any heating or cooling equipment. You may want to underline that word within. That would be exempt from a permit. Number 7, a self-contained refrigeration system containing 10 pounds or less of refrigerant. Make sure you hit 10 in a different color highlighter. If there were 20 pounds of refrigerant in a self-contained refrigeration system, would it need a permit?
Yes.
Yes, it would.
Was that on the test? I thought I remember.
Yeah, this in mechanical, I can't show you
Yeah,
that.
with the tent, the jack, I think it was on the test.
Somebody asked me one time about a negative, they approached me with a negative question regarding this issue. They said, all of the following are exempt from permit except, and then if they had mentioned 20 or 25 pounds of refrigerant, that would be the exception.
I think that was the question, if I remember, yeah.
There you go. So we go to the right-hand column, section 105.2.1, and we're talking about emergency repairs here. All right, where equipment replacements and repairs must be performed in an emergency situation, the permit application shall be submitted within the next working business day to the building official. Section 105.2.2 talks about minor repairs. Ordinary minor repairs may be made with the approval of the building official without a permit, provided the repairs do not include cutting away of any wall, partition, or portion thereof, and so forth. So we're talking about what you need a permit for, what you don't need a permit for, and so forth, all in that section right there.
What was this, I'm sorry?
105.2.2 was that particular section right there, minor repairs. All the way through, we started at 105.2 and now we're going to section 105.3. Begins at the bottom right on page 1.4, right-hand column about halfway down, application for permit, section 105.3. Well, I don't have anything highlighted until we get over to page 1.5. We're still talking about our application, but there's a time limit for our application. Now, this is not the permit itself, but this is the application for the permit. We're applying for a permit, and the application for any proposed work shall be deemed to have been abandoned 180 days after the date of the filing. Be very specific about this. This is not 6 months. This is 180 days. Well, why would your application run out? Well, let's say you applied for a permit, building official came back to you and said, we need some additional information. Well, you didn't get it back to them. Well, after 180 days, you got to start all over again with your application. All right? There's a discussion of asbestos removal at the bottom right of that page, 105.3.6. It talks about whether or not you need a permit. And in the next page, it actually, if you read that section, there's a discussion of an owner doing their own asbestos removal work. And if they do that, on the top of page 1.6, they have to sign what's called a disclosure statement. So you may want to take a look at that and read that section later a little bit in more detail when you have more time. We're going to drop down that page to section 105.4, conditions of the permit. Once you get the permit, all right, you have to do certain things. And in that first paragraph under conditions of the permit, the last sentence says, every permit issued, so this is about the last 5 lines of paragraph 105.4.1, every permit issued shall become invalid unless the work authorized that permit is commenced within 6 months after its issuance, or if the work authorized by such permit is suspended or abandoned for a period of 6 months after the time the work is commenced. You may have heard that you have to have an inspection every 6 months. That's where this comes in right here. Most building departments determine that if you're not having an inspection, well, the work has stopped. So that's why you have to call for an inspection at least every 6 months. Bottom right, 105.11, notice of termite protection. It says a permanent sign which identifies the termite treatment provider and need for reinspection and treatment contract renewal shall be provided. The sign can be posted in 2 places, near the water heater or electrical panel. A lot of people know electrical panel, a lot of people don't know water heater though. Couldn't be either one. 105.12, work starting before the permit. Can you start before you get the permit? Well, believe it or not, it says, upon approval of the building official, the scope of the work delineated in the building permit application and plan may be started prior to the final approval and issuance of permit. And then it goes on to talk about you can't go past your first inspection. But if you get approval of the building official, it says you can start. Now, not getting approval is a different story. We'll see that here in a minute. Top of page 1.8, top left, paragraph 106.3.1. Approval of construction documents. When the building official issues a permit, the construction document shall be approved in writing or by stamp as, quote, reviewed for code compliance, unquote. Let's drop down to the bottom of that column, 106.3.5. We're talking about minimum plan review criteria for buildings. When you submit plans, the plan reviewer is supposed to, as a minimum, look at all these things. What I'd like for you to highlight is under section 1, about the 7th or 8th one down, it says setback and separation. That's of the property lines. They're going to be looking for that on your plans, your setback and separation lines. I'm going to look on page 10. I want you to go over to section 1.10. We're in the right-hand column, and is section 107, paragraph 1, 107.1. We're talking about temporary structures and uses. The building official is authorized to issue a permit for temporary structures and temporary uses. Such permits shall be limited as the time of service, but shall not be permitted for more than 180 days. Now, some people call this a special permit, so you may want to keep that in mind. At some point in the future, somebody may refer to this as a special permit. It's also a temporary permit, 180 days. Let's look at some fees at the bottom right in section 108. Let's look at 108.4, work commencing before permit issuance. Any person who commences any work on a building, structure, electrical, gas, mechanical, or plumbing system before obtaining the building official's approval or necessary permits shall be subject to a penalty of 100% of the usual permit fee in addition to the required permit fee. The penalty is the cost of the permit, but they have to purchase the permit as well on top of that, if they don't have approval of the building official. Let's take a look at inspections at the top of page 1.11 on the left. 109.3. Let's read that last sentence and highlight that baby. The building official shall determine the timing and sequencing of when inspections occur and what elements are inspected at each inspection. Now, first of all, they say the building official determines it, and then they give you a list of what's going to be looked at. Number 1, your foundation, you see everything there. Make sure you find number 2, and make sure you find number 3. All of those things are very important for you to understand what elements are in those inspections. And then I want you to look at the electrical inspection on the bottom of page 11. You have your underground, you have your rough end, and you have your final. 1, 2, and 3. One time somebody asked me, they told me that they were told they had to have 4 inspections, and one of those inspections was a fixture inspection. If you did have to do a fixture inspection, where would that fit in this 1, 2, and 3?
Final.
Before the final. So the fixture inspection would be your 3rd inspection, and then your final.
See, down by us, they won't give you a final inspection if you don't have fixtures up.
Right. You got to have your fixtures to get your final. So if for some reason somebody broke those out and they said there were 4 inspections, the fixture inspection would be your 3rd and the 4th one would be your final. Okay? Let's take a look on page 1.12, right-hand column. What is a threshold building? Anybody have any idea? It's just a fancy name. I'm in section 109.3.6 on page 1.12. A threshold building is just a fancy name for a multi-story building. And when you are inspecting the shoring and reshoring, it is very important that that's done correctly. So the second paragraph in that section, 109.3.6.2, reads, the special inspector determines that a professional engineer who specializes in shoring design has inspected the shoring and reshoring. Okay? We know in the real world all inspectors are special, okay? But when we're talking about, this is actually somebody they call an actual special inspector, okay, to look at the shoring and reshoring. On the top of page 1.13 on the right-hand side, there's section 110. There's certificates of occupancy and completion. What I want you to highlight in that section is on the next page, page 1.14, and this is the first full paragraph on page 14 there, 110.5, revocation. The building official is authorized to, in writing, suspend or revoke a certificate of occupancy under the provisions of this code. So make sure that you can use the exact language. It is suspend or revoke. It's not rescind, it's not remove or anything like that.